Hey guys, Tin Man here, and welcome back to my weekly review of the new One Piece chapter. This week we have chapter 1033. Last week we left off with King versus Zoro, with Enma taking all of Zoro's haki from his arm, and it makes it look like a skeleton and everything, and he can't do anything if he is like this and can't move. And also with Orochi hearing the Shamisen and running into Komurasaki, who he thought was dead. And that's where the chapter ended. But this week we have, on the cover page is Tashigi and Smoker. They're like on a frozen Arctic island, and they're playing, well, Tashigi is playing with these penguins who are pretending to be heroes, and Tashigi is the villain of the story. She has like a little shark hat and everything, and she's surrendering with a little white flag, and Smoker is actually in the back, just not having it. He's just sitting there with his jute, sitting like this, and one of the penguins is like all surprised. He's like, "Please stay away from me, you're scary." And it was a pretty good cover story by Oda. I'm actually waiting for like a new cover story, since we haven't had a new one since Beishi's All My Family, where Goatee and Lola? Yeah, Lola get married at the end, and we haven't had a new one since then, so I've been waiting. It was a pretty good one. So we start off the chapter with Enma still draining Zoro's haki in the fight with King, and Zoro comments telling Enma to stop taking his haki without his permission, and King notices that Zoro is struggling and just not fighting up to par, which he thought that someone of his status should be fighting, and asks him if he's having troubles, and he charges towards him to attack. But right before he does any damage to him, attacks him with his wings, his talons, his sword, anything, he just stops in front of him and just stands there and does nothing. And Zoro is surprised and is just like, "What are you playing at? What are you doing? What trick are you trying to pull on me?" And then Zoro proceeds to stab King in his midsection. I couldn't really tell if he stabbed him in the side or if he stabbed him in the chest by the angle, but it's somewhere in his midsection. And King doesn't react like he's in pain or anything. He just comments that Zoro hit the right spot. And as he says that, an explosion right where Zoro hit him it sets off, and that's the end of the scene. And then we move on to the next scene, where it's Sanji versus Queen in the Skull Dome, the left brain tower in the pleasure hall. Queen asks Sanji if he called the pirate hunter or Zoro on his Denden Mushi, saying that he has no chance of winning versus King. Queen tells Sanji that King is actually part of an extinct race called the Lunarian. That we already knew this, but Sanji's now finding out. But that they were killed off, and that King is actually the last of his kind. He's the last Lunarian, and that's probably why we haven't seen any in the world. And he also comments saying that they are referred to as gods. And when you hear gods, you think of two things. Well, I do anyway. The celestial dragons, when they think themselves as gods, and then God Valley, which was destroyed when Garp and Roger fought against Rox and Big Mom and Wang Ji and all of Rox's crew. So what I'm thinking is that actually God Valley is where the Lunarians were from, and during that battle, God Valley was destroyed, supposedly, or disappeared, and that's why King is actually the last of its kind, because the God Valley was destroyed. And remember that also at God Valley, after the battle, when the Rox crew was defeated, that Big Mom gave Kaido the fish root model as your dragon. He could also ran into King at the end before he escaped and also saved him, and that's why King is so loyal to Kaido. But then Sanji asks Queen how a race like that could be wiped out if they're so strong they could survive in any environment and any condition. How could they be killed? And the only thing that Queen says about the ordeal is, yeah, he would just have to ask King himself. And that's where the scene ends, and we go back to the Zoro versus King fight. So Zoro ends up surviving the explosion, of course, and he ends up commenting that King seemed unaffected by the explosion whatsoever. It's probably due to him being a Lunarian. They're resistant to the environmental disasters and everything. So I would think that an explosion would be nothing to a Lunarian or King in this case. But then Zoro ends up attacking with his one sword style, EI Lethal Lion Song, and he cuts King up across the chest, actually drawing blood, spluttering blood everywhere, and it seems like it did a little bit of damage at least to King. But in retaliation to the attack, he ends up using his Imperial Tempura Udon attack against Zoro, as Enma once again starts draining Zoro's haki, and he's unable to dodge the attack, and it hits him across the side, and also breaking off a giant chunk of Onigashima. And in doing so, Zoro also starts falling and drops all his swords, and he's able to grab his Sanda Kitetsu. And then it goes into like a flashback. Zoro remembering his conversation with Kitetsu, Kitetsu telling him that he was the swordsmith that actually made the Sandai. And then Zoro remembers back to Logtown at Ippon Matsu's sword shop, and Ippon telling Zoro that the sword is cursed, that he can't, in his good conscience, sell it to Zoro. But Zoro, of course, takes the sword anyway after, proving to Ippon that he is a swordsman. He threw it in the air, he held his arm out, and the sword missed. But then we go back to the present. King ends up attacking Zoro again with a flame kick, and then King comments to Zoro that he's crazy for trying to risk his life for a sword, just for a piece of metal. Why would you want to risk your life just for that? Zoro comments that the flame kick burns, and it seems like it did a lot of damage to him. Zoro then finds his Wado Ichimonji. It's actually just sitting in the dirt, poking out, and Zoro comments that he's glad that it didn't fall off the island and everything. And Zoro then remembers Koshiro, Kuina's father, and him, and the conversation that they had when he asked for the sword and the promise that he made to Kuina. So then Zoro remembers Kitetsu again, the conversation he had with Kitetsu, and Kitetsu saying that his Wado was actually forged by the same swordsmith that created Enma, and by extension the Ame no Habakiri, the two swords that Odin used. The master swordsmith Shimosuke Kozaburo. Zoro asks himself how a sword from Wano ended up in the East Blue at Shimosuke Village, and King comments that Zoro finally collected all three of his swords, so Zoro now has all three of his swords to fight. And then, as soon as he comments on that, King uses a winged attack that it's like shooting like wind size, like Kaido's wind size. Not really sure if it's wind or if it's fire or what it is, but he's doing kind of like Zoro's 360-pound Phoenix, 720-pound Phoenix, 1080-pound Phoenix, an attack kind of like that, but with his wings. And as it's called Imperial Twin Blades, and as this is happening, Enma once again starts draining Zoro's haki. And then King starts diving down towards Zoro from the air, and ends up attacking Zoro with his wing, and Zoro blocks it, ends up being able to block it, but he's thrown back through a wall. And then Zoro remembers the conversation that he had with Momo, telling him that Momo tells Zoro that he was told by Kiku not to say the word Tsunachi. Uh, Zoro tells Momo that it's a word that he heard from an old man in his village, but he's never really used the word himself. And Momo seems surprised, like, why would you tell me to say it if you don't even say it yourself? Uh, and then Zoro remembers the old man was always sitting by the shore. And then he comments that the old man was Kuina's grandfather, and he died. And Kuina is still alive at this time, so it was long before probably the promise that the two made. So he didn't really know that it was his her grandfather, until the death and her emotions, the grief that the family had. Uh, Zoro finally puts two and two together, really realizing that the old man was Kozaburo himself. So then we finally get some more of Zoro's backstory through a flashback. We actually get to see Kozaburo as he is saying Tsunachi is a battle cry that gives the warrior courage when he says it. Zoro says it sounds weird, that he isn't going to use it, and then he proceeds to ask Kozaburo if he was a samurai. Everyone at the dojo has commented saying that he was. Kozaburo, he is obviously an old man. He has a beard. He has a long unibrow that comes out to like here, a ponytail. He's in a kimono with a sword on his hip, and he's fishing. And the fishing pole actually kind of looks like a training sword. At least to me, it does. It could have just been like crudely made, but he's also sitting there smoking a pipe. Kozaburo tells Zoro to keep quiet about if he was a samurai and his name, unless he wants the Marines to show up. And Zoro comments, why would the Marines care about you? Like, why would they care about some old man, crazy old man fishing in a village in the East Blue? Kozaburo then tells Zoro that it's none of his business and that he's a useless brat. And then Zoro gets mad and says, screw you, old man, you old useless windbag. And Zoro picks up his two training swords and runs off and proceeds to train. Kozaburo looks over at him and asks Zoro if he's actually tired of training at the dojo. And Zoro comments that he once again lost to Kuina, which we know now is Kozaburo's granddaughter. And he needs to. The Zoro says that he needs to keep training and keep training non-stop so he can finally beat Kuina. So in saying so, Kozaburo actually gives Zoro two swords, like actual swords, not the wooden swords or anything. They're actual swords. Zoro comments, "I have no money to pay for these. Like I can't take these from you." But Kozaburo says that it doesn't matter, they're not really worth much to just take them. And that he can only make swords like this now. And he can't really make the swords that he used to. Kozaburo then proceeds to say, swords exist to cut people down. When a smith makes one, he actually makes the sword to be able to kill as many people as possible. Zoro then seems shocked looking at the two swords that he has. He kind of seems freaked out by them. And then Kozaburo continues saying that each blade is like a person and has its own unique disposition or personality or anything that it wants. A swordsman is one that tames the sword's wild nature and bends it to the swordsman's will. So he has to basically force the sword or gain the sword's trust to be able to use it appropriately. And then Kozaburo says that it's a joke that some swords are called cursed. Like, that's just how named blades are, that swords are meant to kill as many as possible. And that he actually considered it praised when one of his swords are called cursed or bad, he instead of being offended by it. Uh, that at that point that the sword actually fulfilled that its purpose of killing as many as it could, and it continues to, and it's gained that fame. Kozaburo says that he crafted his magnum opus while he was really young, and that it would give you chills just by holding it. So he named it after the Lord of the Underworld, Enma. So then we move on to the final scene of the chapter after the flashback with Zoro and Kozaburo, with Zoro and King's fight. And Zoro comments that he realizes that Enma was the sword that Kozaburo was talking about, his magnum opus that he commented on. And that the village being called Shimosuke wasn't just a coincidence, and because he was told by the younger kids in the village and at the dojo that the village was founded by pirates, actually, and not by somebody from Wano or immigrants or whatever from a different land, but by pirates. Zoro realizes that Kozaburo was a samurai from Wano, and that he was the master swordsmith that Kitetsu was talking about, that made Enma and Abenohaba Kiri. Zoro remembers again Ippon saying, Ippon Matsu from Logtown saying that the sword chooses the wielder. And Zoro grabs Enma once again and is still smoking, or has like flames or some sort of substance like swirling around it like a smoke. And Zoro says that the sword isn't actually acting out of hate or spite, or that it's that's just its nature or whatever. But that Zoro actually just doesn't live up to the standards of the sword standards. So it's actually back and forth. Like Kozaburo said that the swordsman actually bends the sword to the swordsman's will. But in this case, the sword is actually bending the swordsman to the sword's will, and it has to be the other way around, or there has to be some sort of like unison between the two. Zoro comments that he's really surprised that Oden could wield the sword so effortlessly, especially with another sword, dual-wielding swords, the two-sword style, the Nitoryu. He could do it so effortlessly without all his haki being drained. And in doing so, some beast pirates show up saying, commenting that if they could take down Zoro, they might get a promotion. So then they proceed to attack him. But Zoro says the only way that he could please Enma is to just go all out with his haki, just give Enma all his haki. But doing so could actually kill him. But Zoro then says that that's the way it has to be, actually. That's what I actually need to do. I don't need to fight Enma. I need to just give in to him. And in doing so, Zoro unleashes a blast of Conqueror's haki that just knocks out all of the Beast Pirate goons, and they all just fall to the floor and their mouth foaming. But now, Zoro's three swords are all covered in smoke and black lightning, the Conqueror's haki, just like when we saw Luffy with his fist versus Kaido, and Kaido's sword, and then also in the flashback, in Oden's flashback with Roger and Whitebeard when they fought for 3 days on that island. It was the same thing. The swords couldn't touch, and it had the black lightning and everything. King says that he sees, and he asks Zoro if he has any kingly ambitions or the will of a king. And Zoro has a little remembrance of Luffy when he asked him to join his crew, saying that if he's going to be the king of the pirates, that he would settle for no less than the best swordsman in the world. It makes perfect sense. And Zoro then comments to King that he is right, that he made a promise to his captain and his best friend, and that's where this chapter ends. This was a really good chapter this week. We got some really good exposition from Queen with the whole him telling Sanji that they were referred to as gods, that that King is in fact the last Lunarian that at least everybody knows of. There could be another one, but I doubt it. I'm looking to try and make a couple of follow-up videos to this chapter because there's a lot to discuss. I appreciate anybody who actually made it through this video. I'm still trying to find my style, if I want to use the webcam or if I want to go back to what I was doing in my first video. I appreciate it if you could like and subscribe and keep giving me a chance. And I thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.